Good afternoon, everybody. We are Team Cudaceus. We are really excited to be here. We spent this semester trying to tackle the problem of America's organ donor shortage. Just to go around brief introductions, my name is Katie Mangialardi, and I'm in the science policy class.
My name is Amanda Finnell. I'm a graduate student in the policy class.
My name is Stephanie Donahue. I'm a student in the policy class.
I'm Hannah Smith. I'm in the bioethics class.
I'm Alex Lawrence. I'm in the rhetoric class.
I'm Charlie Fedebon. I'm in the science policy class as well.
So just to get started and give you a little bit of an introduction, we've had a really interesting semester trying to find a solution. We decided to target college students as the solution to America's organ donor shortage. And we've consulted a lot of organizations, spent some time on the Hill, as you can see, at a couple of meetings with senators' offices. And we think that the best way to give you insight into what we've done this semester is to take you through that 2 to 3 minute pitch that we went through with Health LAs. So we'd appreciate your undivided attention for 2 to 3 minutes as we go through that, and we're gonna kind of take you through that process and go from there. So with that, we're gonna get started.
So to add some context to the specific pitch, this was addressed at the health legislative assistant at Senator Boxer's office, who's a Democrat from California, and I'm a California constituent. So thank you, Mr. Rivera, for taking the time to meet with us today to discuss a potential solution to California's organ donor shortage. So as a California constituent, I'm concerned that California's organ transplant waitlist is the largest in the country. It currently has 23,411 registrations, which accounts for 17.4% of the U.S. national waitlist. To add some context to these statistics, that accounts for 2 to 3 deaths of Californians daily. So, while it's clearly an issue in California, the organ donor shortage also extends to all the other states in our nation as well. And so, as such, our team has developed a strategy that could increase the donor base by 9 million individuals annually. And the key to our solution is college students.
So currently there are limited opportunities to become a registered organ donor. For example, the only time that individuals are actively solicited to become organ donors is when you go to the DMV and you're asked to fill out that form. So that's what we want to change. We want to pose this question more often, and specifically, we'd like to target college students like ourselves. We want to do this by targeting the FAST Act, or the Financial Aid Simplification and Transparency Act, amending this bill to require universities who receive federal funding to ask that question: would you like to become an organ donor, as a prerequisite to semesterly course registration. So we've discussed a bunch of ways to implement this solution, which you'll find in the packets that we're going to hand out to you now, but the bottom line is really clear. Targeting college students is a really opportunistic way to end the organ donor shortage and save millions of lives, and we really hope that you'll consider our proposal.
So if I could call your attention to our little poster up here, there's actually printouts of the poster in your packet, so if you can't see it, please find those in your packet. Just to give a little more context to why we think students are the answer, right now there's over 21 million college students nationwide, and of those college students, 71% are not yet registered donors, but of those 71%, 60% are willing to sign up. And overall, we believe that this would increase the donor base by 9 million students annually. So how our proposal works. Step 1, we would like to amend the FAST Act by making the requirement to ask the question, would you like to be an organ donor, a condition of having access to federal student education loans and funds. So step 2 would be requiring that they ask each semester if they would like to be organ donors, and step 3 would be the students on the back end following the question to organdonor.gov, where they can choose to sign up. And again, why college students? We believe it's practical. The institutions are already in place, and we believe that it would be an easy system to set up, but it's also effective because these students will be registered for a lifetime, and we'll be targeting a pool of students that is constantly being refreshed year in and year out. So now is when we would typically ask for questions, but we're going to start by going over some of the questions that we've been asked in some of our other meetings.
So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to pretend to be the Health LA and ask them some mock Q&A questions. These are all questions we actually did receive from LAs that we spoke to on the Hill. Okay. So why this topic? Why organ donation?
So we chose the topic because we've all encountered this organ donor shortage problem, either in our classes or even in our personal lives. And when we came together and decided to work on something, we thought that this would be a great opportunity to try and fix that problem.
So is this a class project or something, or you just all love?
So none of us are actually in the same class. We're part of a working group through an educational initiative at Georgetown University, where they kind of bring us all together from different classes in a collaborative effort to affect change beyond the front gates of the university.
Very interesting. So what other methods do you guys consider? Oh, they did. They thought all that was very interesting. That was a good pitch. So what other methods have you considered? What drew you to this potential solution as a means to combat organ transplant donation?
Yeah, so in the beginning of our work, we really explored a lot of different methods and also researched things that have already been tried, which was anything from offering tax credits to organ donors to postage stamps that are meant to raise awareness for organ donation. But we settled on this because we thought it was a way that we could effectively and frequently target a population that would be willing to sign up while avoiding different controversial methods, such as an opt-out program that we really didn't see potential for passing in the United States.
Going off of that, we just thought that this was a great way to tap into, like Alex said before, those 60% of students who might not be organ donors but would like to. So we really wanted to pose the question more often in a non-controversial way.
So who else have you guys contacted about this issue? Have you contacted any nonprofit organizations or companies like that?
We actually did. We've been in contact with a few different organizations. The American Transplant Foundation, we have had multiple phone calls with, multiple email correspondences, and they've actually put us in contact with Donor Alliance and a regional area called the Washington Regional Transplant Community. We're very connected through them, and UNOS, even we discovered, has a program that targets colleges specifically because the demographic of 18 to 34-year-olds, which is the college demographic, is the bracket that donates the most organs. So they are targeting this as well, so we're working with them to get involved in their college initiatives.
So why the FAST Act? What bill, why choose this bill of all potential bills to amend with this potential option?
So we chose the FAST Act because, one, it provides an incentive for universities to implement this policy. Universities, by all means, want to participate in federal education loan programs, and by making this a condition of those programs and participating in the FAFSA, we definitely think that they would adopt it if it was passed. And in terms of practicality, this bill does have bipartisan support and sponsors and is currently in the HELP committee already. And the HELP committee chairman, Senator Alexander, is the one his office wrote the bill. So we are optimistic that it will get out of committee and onto the floor.
Okay, so you say this is pretty easy to implement. Do you have any idea of how easy this would be? Have you talked to people at your university about pursuing this option?
Yeah, so the method we've proposed allows universities to use already existing infrastructure. Universities already require students to register by semester for courses, so our hope would be that they would just add a hyperlink within their coding to organdonor.gov.
Okay, those are all my questions. So those are some of the questions that we received, and we felt that doing a little mock Q&A would show our understanding of the context of our product and how it can operate. So our current working status for this is we've kind of changed our pitch a lot along the way. Initially for the science policy class, we had about a 5-minute pitch, and then after hearing some feedback from Alex in the rhetoric class, we trimmed it down to about 2 or 3 minutes instead. We felt that that would be a more effective means of communication. When we first went to see Boxer's LA, we felt like he kind of underestimated our knowledge of the issue on and of itself. And so he started...
It's an ethos problem.
Yeah, so he started throwing all these statistics at us, and we felt that we needed to approach the next meeting by showing our full understanding of the problem. So we mentioned more of the organizations that we've worked with, how long we've been working on this project, and so we were able to move past those kinds of issues into more actual, better questions that Fine Science LA had for us about the amendment for the bill. So since then, we went and saw actually Senator Brown, and they went to coffee with Senator Brown actually, and his
right
LAs. A lot of senators host coffee hours early during the week. And we have heard about many issues that they had with the FAST Act in and of itself, and to instead maybe focus on the Higher Education Act of 1965, which is being reauthorized as should be being reauthorized this year, and that's because that bill will pretty much for sure pass. And the same Senator Alexander, who Alex mentioned, has actually personally guaranteed he will finish the rewrite of the reauthorization by the end of this year. So this is a really good window for us potentially to try and amend that, because if we were able to pass an amendment for that act, then it would pretty much for sure be signed into law as it's reauthorized next year.
And we actually found a task force for the reauthorization online, so we have a contact there we're hoping to pursue. We're drafting the email for that now.
So yeah, we see that as a good way to change maybe the vehicle for our product, because the product in and of itself is still the same. It's still the same bill amendment, it's still the same objective, but we're changing the vehicle which that can be implemented into law.
On the other side of that, if you don't mind me interrupting, we feel that change is necessary too, because we've also heard that many senators and many of their legislative assistants don't find the FAST Act to be something that's going to pass. They think that the two-step FAFSA is just not a good idea at all, and it will actually create more problems than the good that could come from it. So given that like our initial ideas of the practicality of choosing that bill because it should pass is really not true, we do think that this change is necessary.
I think that going forward, just one lesson that we kind of took from all of this is to possibly downplay exactly what piece of legislation we're amending this to, because just making clear to the LAs, the people that we're meeting with, that our bottom line is that we want to mitigate this organ donor shortage. And kind of, as you guys experienced when you went to coffee with the senator, maybe not even mentioning that FAST Act at first makes them more receptive to the problem, and then kind of delving in deeper from there as to, well, how can we get this implemented? So that was, I think, a learning experience from all of us.
Yeah, and we definitely reiterated that. So in every follow-up email with the health legislative assistant that we met with, we mentioned that. That was kind of the closing statement. Like, while we think this is one potential solution, we are open to other avenues. So.
And people have been extremely helpful in giving us different feedback and other suggestions as well.
So yeah, looking forward, we have a meeting with Senator Murray's Health LA next week, and so Senator Murray's from Washington State, and I'm a resident of Washington State, so we're going to hopefully be able to speak with her about that. She's also the highest ranking Democrat on the Health Committee, so that's our main reason also for being able to talk to her, because she would hopefully have influence in proposing this bill amendment. Then we're also going to be going to some more coffee hours, hopefully with the senators from New Hampshire and Michigan. And then we're in contact with Georgetown's CIO and hopefully her office, and we're going to try and discuss with her the logistics of how that could be implemented at Georgetown, because actually Feinstein's LA told us that, if you're able to get a pilot program in place and you could show that this is easy and it works, and then it'd be much easier to convince other people that this is a viable solution.
Have you heard back yet?
I have not gotten an email back from her yet. So yeah, that's our current progress on the issue. So we're open to questions and answers.
So,
I mean, I'll do it for you guys, but ideally you would pick from there, so
Oh.
take your question.
pick the person
Ben?
that's gonna agree.
Okay.
One, I think the point on not worrying about the vehicle, as you know, is right. And I think one thing you actually ought to look at, given how much interest is actually just having someone introduce it as a freestanding bill, getting co-sponsors, so it shows the idea has legs, and then can be picked up by anybody. So two quick things. One is one thing that wasn't in your presentation that we've talked about a bunch and didn't come up in the questions. I'm wondering, did you get the pushback that are you making people actually sign up to give organs, or
That question wasn't posed to us at all in any of the meetings.
We were pretty good about making sure we said pose the question or not require
so
people
you
to
made
sign
it clear
up.
enough that it didn't even come up?
Exactly.
We made it very clear, so they didn't spend any time asking about
Okay.
that.
And then my general question is, I mean, you covered a little bit of this by a very well-done presentation, by the way. But so what's I mean, you've talked a little bit about what you've learned, but what's surprised you about this? What things happened that you wouldn't have expected? Not necessarily even on the particular issue, but just in the whole process of dealing with the senator offices, positive, negative, just what have you encountered that you wouldn't?
I'd be happy to start.
Sure.
I think it's been surprisingly easy to, especially as students, to just kind of, so far, to reach out to these offices and speak with them. We've pretty much, other than a few offices, have gotten responses almost within a day for meeting requests or when coffee hours or any questions we might have or even just thank yous. And they're very excited to speak with us. I mean, also note, like when we went to Senator Boxer's office, we also walked around to different offices just trying to find contacts. And every office we spoke to was like took us very seriously and professionally, would tell us who to reach out to, gave us business cards, told us like how to set the schedule so that like we have the best chance of getting a meeting. It really just seems a lot easier than we thought it would, or at least I did.
I was actually also surprised by like the level of enthusiasm that a lot of the LAs showed
Yeah.
in our product and our objective. And I thought that was very motivating for us, and they didn't spend as much time spending, oh, well, like, why are you doing this, instead of, how can you implement this and how can you affect the most change? And so I love that. I thought that was great. They actually really cared about what we were doing and tried to provide us useful advice.
Because even at the coffee hour, we talked to one LA who said, "Oh, Nikki, you got to come over here and hear this," and brought over another LA from the education community to talk to us, because it affects education and health. So we got to meet different LAs from so many different offices in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Like,
and they kept passing out
yeah.
cards. They said, "Oh, I didn't bring one. I didn't think I needed to bring one today. Now I wish I had." And so we were like, "Oh."
And they basically had to like kick us out of coffee hour.
Yeah.
For so long.
We were so
Yeah.
excited. Yeah.
They didn't keep you long enough to harvest your organs. Go
I
ahead.
wanted to ask a clarifying question on what the proposal is exactly. Is it that when you go to register each semester, there's a question, and then simply a link to go to the organ donation? So you're not answering the question on the university site.
Right.
So that should be in the packet here. So this is for the MyAccess is the program that Georgetown uses for course registration. And so when you fill this out as a student, there's a bunch of essentially personal identification and kin information that you have. And so our idea for Georgetown specifically, and many other universities probably have a similar model, but just to include under that checklist a link to organdonor.gov. And from there, which is on the next page, it'll take you to this website. So from there, you can just select your state.
Hang on a second. When you say review your organ donor status, what does that mean?
That would take you directly to organdonor.gov just by
So you
clicking
don't
on
have
it.
to click on it, or you do have to.
You do have to click on it in order
Every
to.
semester after you said
Yeah,
yes
it's
the first
really
time?
not.
Every semester, every question that's already on there,
We
we
have
have
to
to
do it.
click through every link on there
That's
already.
fine.
So
Just
when
asking.
we,
Mhm.
yeah, it's very annoying for us. I don't mean to attack you.
That's
Yeah.
great.
It's like, it's really annoying to have to keep going through things, but it does make you like review it every time. And like you constantly have to update like where you're living on campus.
It's so annoying that it makes people click from yes to no.
Yeah.
Well, so just to follow up on that, so I do think, and I have a really quick question also on your numbers, okay, but let me just stay with this broader point. So I think in the current political climate, and with the depth with which Obamacare has been embraced now, worries about death panels, really. Having students all over the United States, so not just at universities like Georgetown where people have one level of trust in the healthcare system and then one level of education, but every university and college having to click through, review your organ donation status is a disaster. As opposed to, would you like to become an organ donor and a link to the site? But what philosophers would call speech act is conforming by saying you must review your status. I see parents looking at that and freaking out.
So
So
you're saying
to me, it's helpful to see sort of how you're sort of prototyping how it might actually be implemented. And I think everything is going to turn on that kind of detail.
Okay. So you're saying changing the word prompting would be a better way of.
You can't mandate reviewing,
Right.
in my opinion, humbly, you can't mandate that universities require students to review their organ donation status to get registered. It's not about whether they say yes or no, it's having to declare that for it to move on, even to click. I think that's I would urge you to step away from that. And I love the idea.
I guess I'm just wondering, how is that different from the DMV when you're doing it at 16 at the DMV when they ask you? I just, yeah.
It's the wording.
It's the wording.
It's the wording.
Yeah.
It's the wording.
It's
I'd
a
like to
DMV
become an organ donor.
It's an
Okay.
invitation.
Not just
Okay.
There, as opposed to a mandated review of status, there
Okay.
are a lot of people who do believe that if you check yes on organ donation, that EMTs will not help you as much. It's crazy, but it's not an insignificant proportion of the population.
I mean, you came across that, right?
when you were doing some of your research.
Yeah.
we did.
I still have
And can you read the rest of the bill? Like the concept,
Just got it.
what you're saying here isn't just that, it's that every student, every semester, doesn't just review the status, but has to follow the hyperlink to OregonDonor.gov.
Right.
You have to follow the hyperlink to, like, it's not that you say yes or no, and then if you say yes, it sends you to.
Well, we're not asking them yes or no. We're asking them to go to the website.
The
Because
reason
you're
is-
not asking that,
As
it
a
says in
condition
your
of
stuff.
registration.
By requiring
Just
that
said
he or she
there's
follow a
requirements that
hyperlink.
you use for the presentations, right? And there's a reason that you all like sort of made sure to emphasize to senators that you wanted to invite students, right? But and you made like interesting. I mean, there's like a parallel rhetorical choice you made on the My Access form, right? It's review your address, review your this, review your that. So you chose to. I think it's a way that makes sense. Review your organ donation, but like there's implications. I think like what I actually suggest it's better for your project to not be parallel with the other clicks. That's all.
I think something else that we had discussed with Professor Slakey and Goldston is the potential to introduce this idea as a pilot in the legislation. So maybe something where we, picked 5 or 6 schools of different types, and maybe talked through other professors, specialists as far as wording and how to do that, and looking at success rates and enrollment rates. Maybe that would be something going forward to really narrow that down and figure out what is the best way, what is the least possible controversial / offensive way to do this.
Can I respond quickly to your comment, Arjun, actually? So I think it would be, all right, hopeful idea is just to ask people a question. So if we were able to change it to a yes-no thing, where the yes links you through to the organ donation and the no just fills out the checklist, would that, do you think, kind of solve the issue? Because it wouldn't be, you have to follow the hyperlink. It would be, you can,
I personally don't think you want to have colleges having the information if you're enrolled as an organ donor.
Yeah, and
Just to say, would you like to, it's just a cheerful, would you like to help out? And just next to it, a hyperlink.
yeah, because I don't think we want colleges having that access either. And I mean, it also would complicate the process because then the colleges would need to report to the registries, and so this way it would be directly synced. So I mean, because the DMV has to submit those registries, and so we're
That's
trying
why
to
we
keep it
had them.
simplified.
Yeah, that's why we had them going to OregonDonor.gov, because then they're registering with their state through that website. Like the college is just taking you to that website.
And the other component was that if you redirect them to the website, they're automatically presented with information on the subject, as opposed to just asking because at the DMV, most states don't offer context about the issue. It's just, do you want to become an organ donor, yes or no? And so we think that this will help students make more informed decisions.
And the information is updated on the website too. The graphics change even since we've been on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely another reason why we want to frequently ask it, because the data, the information is different.
So just to clarify, then what you're saying is, if we look at that My Access page that we made, at the bottom of those list of questions that already exist, just having like a little gray box that says, hey, would you like to become an organ donor, with the hyperlink, and no clickable mandates, if that makes, not requiring, okay,
Right.
okay.
You can skip right over it.
What if you didn't ask
But
the
also
question?
don't echo the institutional language, right? You want to avoid the appearance that the university is somehow affiliating itself or has a vested interest in the answer. That's the concern, right? Which you already know because it was part of your presentation, but the choices you made here make it look a little
And
strange.
there's a couple of different things so that you could look at for that, right? So I don't know if this is good or bad. I can see both, but the way that say airlines take care of that is by saying federal law requires, right? Now there's a downside because then it gets to the question of, do you wanted to make it, and I actually personally like this idea, but I was down, make it that the students have to click through, right, regardless of the way the invitation looks. The other thing would be, as a pilot, especially if you do it as a pilot, see if actually just having the invitation without the requirement works or not, right? And you could try it different ways. In fact, you could have one university that volunteers to do it with a requirement and one that doesn't, and get some. There would be other things you'd have to, that might not be equal, but you get some sense of what differential you had depending on how mandatory it was.
If you ask the question, and then if you ask the question, do you want to do this, and then have a link, clicking on the link is a send, that you're like, yes, I would like to. Right? Isn't it the same thing? You're saying don't ask the question on the site, just have the link, but
Could be, did you want some information about it?
yeah, do you want to consider, or please consider And then the link. Well, I have another like sort of unrelated
Raise your
question.
hand.
Huh?
Wherever the rules, raise your hand.
I have another.
And then they call it, and then they call it.
So I want to go back to how you're presenting this, which I think you're doing a great job about, and I think you have a lot of great things. I have first a comment to your response to the question of why are you doing this. It was a great pitch for the class, and I love that. But I do think, and I heard it in the first crit and earlier in the semester, that I think you have a stronger case for why organ donation is so important, and is not just like because you're in this class and you're kind of working together on that project. That's why you're sitting there and all of that. But I think it's an opportunity to really make the case to the Health LA and ultimately to the member about why this absolutely should get attached to whatever bill is going to move this year, because organ donation is so critical. You have that information. I'm just not sure that you're presenting it that way when asked that question. So that's sort of a comment. My other comment is, in your numbers here, if I were an LA looking at this, you're citing statistics, but I don't, where are these coming from? Have you gotten that question?
Yeah, so in Senator Boxer's legislative assistant's office, he asked that question, and the data is from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services through the OPTN website. So
Put that on the bottom of the slide here.
okay.
Give them the resources that they can go confirm that themselves. 99% of them won't because they're busy, but let them know that you're getting this from a reputable source. My other, just really quickly, in terms of this, like, I know this is for California, but this graph here, this pie chart, doesn't tell me any information. It truly is sort of, the fact that California has 17% of and the other, or 83%, that could be just one line on a chart somewhere. And there are some other statistics that you talk about verbally that could be better used in that visual space. So just some comments.
Can I follow
about
up?
how you, please?
Which stats were you most moved by that you would rather see there?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that you might use that to talk more about, I mean, you have it here in terms of the wait list and the power of donors and everything. You might use this space to build that out in terms of why organ donation is so important, or the total number of lives that could be saved over I remember at one point, and the numbers might get fuzzy, but I remember at one point you were talking about a graph of if X number of college students per year register, then over the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to fill this gap. Put that graph in here, because if I were looking at it, I'd go, God, we got to pass this year, because
Well,
sorry.
so the gap is not between just organ donors on a card and the need for organs. It's,
People
the gap is dead people.
Right.
And so the gap is not closed in 5 years.
You're right.
Not that many college students got we hope
You're
not
right.
so many got.
You're
Well,
right.
that's why we always
But
wanted to
you
phrase
could-
it that way
you
too.
could still
Yeah.
make a point about how increasing the number of registered donors is. You can
Long
use
term.
that here, but you're right. Agree.
I would just recommend taking what's the middle box now for on the bottom, right? So do this, move this part down to the bottom. This is the transition moment. It could be a graph about why college students are the answer. And you got this in the bottom.
Yep.
This link is long.
I just had a technical point about that. The only reason it was like that is because when we were originally going to all go to the same meetings, when we met with someone else, I was just going to cut the California part off. And I wanted to keep it. That's the only reason why it was like that. So,
Yeah. For Ohio, we just took that California page out.
yeah, that was the only reason why.
So you got reasons why requiring a visit may not be the best approach. approach, so I'm going to give you a different pitch on this. So what you don't want to do is negotiate with yourselves on this. You've got your reasons why requiring a visit is a good idea. Fine. You've got some great recommendations here about what alternatives might be more palatable, but go in with the idea that you have conviction about, and then be willing to compromise down to something else. If you're compromising before you ever go in the room, they're going to continue to compromise and soften your idea even more. So my suggestion is come in with what you want. You're getting a positive reception from people, but understand all the things that have been said, and you've now been given great ideas for how to soften it in the conversation. So that's one. So since I brought up the idea of compromise, let's suppose that this is an amendment and it actually gets applied to a big appropriations bill at the end of the year. And one part of that appropriations bill is that it actually increases interest rates on student loans. So now you're in a position where the bill that has the amendment, and this happens routinely on the Hill, so this isn't a hypothetical. So the bill now has something you both want, which is your donation program, but it also has this associated negative effect of increasing interest rates on student loans. What would your advice be to the Senate offices that you encourage to do this? Would you tell them to go ahead and vote for that bill or not? And I'd like to hear from all of you on this. I don't know if you'll all come out in the same place.
Should we just go
And
down
I'll
the
remind you,
line?
this happens routinely in government.
I mean, as someone who's going to law school next year and finances out heavily with loans, I'm probably the most conflicted, I would say. I mean, I don't know if anyone else would want to challenge me on
The
that.
one in grad school, we're conflicted.
Yeah, oh yeah, obviously in grad school too. Yeah, I mean, like, I think we're both probably the most conflicted about that. I mean, I would want more time than just answering you right now to think about that.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
another thing that often happens in processes is
Yeah.
these things come together in minutes, truly in minutes, and decisions have to be made. Now, let's say that the staffer gave you the courtesy of calling you and saying, look, here's what we got now. Your amendment's in there, but here's a bill. What's your recommendation? What do you think?
Well, I would want to know what the likelihood of the interest rate rising is going to be, like, regardless of whether we attach our amendment to that or not. Because if it's going to pass, then I want it to have our amendment on it, regardless of, what that means for my loans. Now, if there's a chance it's not going to pass and we have a viable option of doing something else, then I would probably take a step back and say, like, no, we're going to explore other options.
Everybody else, just trying to get a sense of where you draw your line.
Yeah, I think that I agree, but if it came down to the senator, this is the case, and they just had to vote yes or no, I would hope that there would be some other outlet for our amendment that wouldn't affect.
But we want it passed right now. So I feel like it's not about the how, it's getting it through, because we're thinking long term.
I think that it's also important to kind of remember where we're coming from as college students. We chose to target college students because we thought we could affect change, and if this is something that could also have a negative connotation, I think that's something that's important to consider. And I think that say that this was fast forward a year from now and we had met with X number of Senate offices, I think considering all of the feedback we had gotten into how kind of moldable this is into attaching onto other things and exploring those options, seeing what that would be, what those options would be, and evaluating at
That's
that
what you
point.
would tell the LA on the phone.
What I would tell the LA on the
Yeah, I mean, you're on the phone right now with the legislative assistant, asking what your recommendation is. That's the answer.
I think it was.
I don't know yet.
I think it's important to stand by the fact that we're college students, and I know that for me, coming from the fact that coming out of college being in debt, I think that's something that's important to me, and I think I would stand by it. I think I would wait for the right thing. I think that's my final say.
To play devil's advocate, you could look at it as if you're whether to prioritize the saving of lives of Americans, regardless of age group, over making it creating fiscal difficulties for a subset of the population. And I think prioritizing the health of Americans, like increasing the donor base by 9 million, is so profound that I think it would be a hard opportunity to pass up.
Isn't it either or?
Either or what?
Like, I understand that decision that comparison, but maybe you could not increase like the interest rate of student loans and also keep this.
Oh, I agree. But I'm saying if there was no other avenue, then I think I would still promote the passage of the bill.
If we're giving an opportunity to get this passed,
You can't pass that.
I feel like, you know, that window of opportunity, how many, like, it's only come 3 other times in other iterations of this class. And I feel like we would want to take that.
And this affects so many different, just to go off what Stephanie said, so many different types of the population, old, young. I mean, it could benefit college students as much as it's hurting them, because we need organs too. So as much as the loans are hurting, you're also helping.
Arjun?
I would also say, if possible, to explore other avenues. The difficulty with increasing payment for student loans is that maybe less people go to college, which is not great if we're trying to use that as a vehicle to increase the donor base. But I think in a long-term effect, this could be a viable option, but it's also unique in that an option like this hasn't really been suggested before. And people could reapproach the interest rate on student loans that could be reduced in the future. But I don't necessarily see that an amendment like this will be passed anytime soon.
Can I just
Except for that.
Just
Oh, yeah.
so background doesn't change. Those are great answers and great questions. Just gets a little bit of what Alex was saying. When this really happens, there are several things that can happen. Either you're along for the ride and nobody cares, and actually no one's going to raise the question, or someone says, "Back this bill, we're taking your stuff out of it," then you're really, there. Or someone's doing the reverse, which is, we're having trouble passing this bill, and we've added your stuff as a sweetener. So for your stuff, more likely in the neutral category, but you could indeed be, in a situation where someone's actually using it. And as Slake says on different kinds of bills, this Professor Slake says, this comes up all the time. And what's the engine of the bill? What's the sweetener? What can it do without? So anyway, it's an interesting situation. But it could also come up in a way that you guys are along for the ride and nobody cares less that you're part of that, and you just get a free pass. Either way. Then you might just feel guilty that you. Sorry, I couldn't share more questions.
I wanted to get clarification on the number. I'm not sure if I got the right one. So, fall 2014, 21 million students expected to attend university. I take it that's a 4-year cohort,
I think I'm pretty sure, yeah.
right?
It's higher, yeah, 4-year higher institutions. We didn't know that.
60% to 71% of 21 million is a 4-year figure, not an annual figure. So it's 9 million over every 4 years.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
so
what it should be.
Well, then accounting for the freshman class that's coming in too.
No, you're bringing in 9
so
million
every
students.
4 years, how many, there's a footprint, 21
Yeah.
million
That's what it should
new bodies every 4 years, even though there's overlap. So it's 9 million.
Every 4 years.
And of course, you do want to highlight to see if the 60% figure, which is I take a survey figure.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
it's
found that in previous research.
OPTN.
surveying.
Yeah,
so you
that's-
want to see what's the actual sign-up rate.
Right.
What am I trying to say? Transition? Whatever. Conversion. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Awesome. They're probably, there are some other programs to increase, including in Europe, to increase organ donations, so say what their conversion rates were. Was there a gap between survey data and actual conversion? That would help the background. And then I do think it would be helpful for you guys to address the gap between being in a pool and saving somebody's life. Because you're going to get asked that, and you just want to say, of course that's true. God forbid they die soon. We don't want that. We just want to build the nation's donor pool.
And there were some statistical problems at the early on because of missing that difference. And it's actually always been a problem a little problem I've got with this chart with the 2 being on there together. Plus, if the numbers are flat here, does that include people being taken off because they've actually died and were given? Is this new? Actually, is this new registered donors? The blue line on the bottom, is that new registered organ donors every year, or is that cumulative?
No, that's cumulative.
Yeah, it's to date.
Okay, so that raises a question of,
Those are
people coming on and off that either for death or changing their mind?
Right.
Or
When
I have the
The number
calculator.
in the information, like in years
Right.
You said you were surprised
Yes,
at like the
Yeah,
feedback
these
response
are
to it?
donations by registered organ donors. Correct. Those are the numbers of deceased donors.
It says registered organ donors.
Yeah, that needs to be fixed.
Okay, good. I'm glad I asked.
So you said you were surprised by how excited people were about it? So this is maybe you guys are in the wrong cohort to ask this, but do you need a bill? Like, if you pitched it to universities, would maybe they'd just be, at least for pilot, interested in trying it out without having to be federally mandated to do so?
Can I actually just follow up on that question? Because I think I heard somebody earlier mentioned consideration of whether or not you wanted to try and jump in on a pre-existing bill with something like those related issues, or you were considering the relative merits of trying to persuade somebody to actually sponsor a bill that's about this, right? So my question is the relationship between those possibilities and a pilot program, and what degree legislation has to be in place at all for that to happen. It's kind of like the next steps. Like, what makes most sense in the short term, medium, and long term? Is that a friendly amendment to your question?
That's exactly what
I mean, if I could speak to Arjun's point first, it would be great to explore any avenue possible. I think at first, obviously being in the Gov cohort, we were focused on doing it through government channels, but just practicality-wise, if we can get every university on board by passing one bill, then this is kind of a no-brainer. Obviously, it's just not as easy as like saying it and doing it, but
no, that makes total sense. It was for that reason that I wanted
right.
the pilot.
You are reaching out to the CIO.
Yeah, that's the idea of a pilot's a great one.
Yeah, and the idea of the pilot was actually brought up by the health legislative assistant from Senator Feinstein's office, and she said it would be really difficult to pass federal legislation without a pilot program, so she was seeing it as like a means to an end, not as like the implementation of it itself.
That's right. It contributes to your effort to persuade the Senate
Right.
Exactly.
board.
So you made the comment that it's been easy, so I want to
I get meetings.
Well, what I'm going to say is the same as what my colleagues are going to say. Yes, it has been easy for you, and I think you should pause and reflect on why that is. And one reason is clear, it's because you've been doing things right. There's plenty of people who could take this very idea and get nowhere and not get the audience on the Hill. And there's a lesson here, which is, you're working for the fact that you're constituents. You're going to coffee hours because you're the constituents, or you're taking full advantage of that avenue that's available to every constituent, but most of them will never take advantage of that. Your materials, the research that you've done, you've reached out to other organizations. You're basically answering every question before they've even asked it, right? Even the why you guys, why should we listen to students? You've got that one down too. And then finally is your idea makes a lot of sense, right? And to an extent it can sell itself. I mean, it's implementable, right? And then you've got almost gold when you hit that last piece if you were to get Georgetown to do the pilot. So I want to make sure you reflect on the fact that, Congress is not as an open an institution as you guys are seeing it. Right? And that is in part because you're doing so much right.
And studio isn't usually this easy.
Just to build on that, I mean, Congress is more porous than people expect, but I think what Professor Slade says is exactly right. Part of it, though, is you picked an issue that people get. The LAs know this issue is out there, and you've got an interesting way into it. So you didn't have to start by why does anyone care about this? You've got an answer to that in a way. I just wanted one other thing on this pilot thing, because I think the advice you got was good, but you should be aware there's a little bit of a catch-22. So we can't do it until someone pilots it, because how do we know if it works? And then if you get enough pilot, then people will say, well, then why do you need federal law? So that's always a trap with this stuff. There's no way out of it, and both sides of it actually have some legitimacy and some rhetorical, or somewhat rhetorical nature, maybe not the way that Matt uses rhetorical, but you should be aware that it's a little bit of a double-edged sword.
Okay.
That's not a reason not to have Georgetown do it.
Your answer to that though was good. I think too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of institutions. There are a lot of universities, and this is one fell swoop. If the pilot demonstrates, they should do it.
Yeah, and if you do decide to do different types of universities, there are official classifications of universities usually by how much research funding they get that will actually get you the gradations that you're looking for. So that's not like a scale you have to make up. Certainly the people working on the Higher Ed Act know that those classifications very well.
I think that really quick, one reason that we chose California to start off with, besides the fact that Stephanie was a constituent, was because it had such a large network of schools. So even as far as, fast forward thinking about pilots, and if we could get the senator's office to support us in looking at a variety of different schools, I think that might be interested too, besides Georgetown.
We could even use UNOS too, because they already have interest and sincere interest.
Say more what UNOS is, because you mentioned them.
Oh, the United. Oh, sorry. The United. Oh, and Network of Organizations. Thank you.
But what do they explain?
Oh, they're the overarching. So the country is divided into different regions. There's 12 of them. And UNOS is kind of the very overarching, and there's a bunch of different levels that filter up to UNOS, which is this very big overarching, which is charged from Congress in order to be in charge of all organ donations, and a bunch of nonprofits that have different roles, like who's in charge of collecting the organ, who's in charge of saying where does it go, who's in charge of actually transporting it, and UNOS is the one that is overarching all that.
That would be great. 3 quick pieces of follow-up advice. Number 1, the Kennedy Institute is Bob Veach, who's one of you. Have you talked to him?
We met with him.
Yeah, I met with
Yeah,
him.
never mind. Number 2, did you have Republicans on your list of people you're going to talk to?
Yes.
Yes.
Some
Yeah.
states?
Tennessee.
That'll work.
Yeah,
So
because
do
the
that
guy
too.
who Lamar Alexander actually
It's
So
from
you do that too. Third, you might want to talk to a historically black college student. So African American populations were one that has, by the way, earned mistrust in the healthcare system. And this issue of trust, that is my final bit of advice. Do not pretend it away. It is actually, other than apathy, the number one reason that we are in an organ shortage situation. So it's the elephant in the room. You need to lean into it and work with it. And fourth last piece of advice, I think adding the rhetoric of you want to build a culture of donation, as opposed to some of your rhetoric right now is about, I want the organs now, I want to save lives now, which is about wishing dead. Okay. But what's so great about getting students early is you get a critical mass of those. You will change the culture around donation for generations to come. That's our capital campaign.
Yes.
The only problem is
I know that was saying target college students. Right?
Yes.
You said it a bunch of times.
Like,
and this is the same.
But actually related to that, even though this was the downside of culture of donation is then you're actually taking a position on whether you want people to donate rather than about giving them the opportunity. And I think that actually, and that raises different issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is they have 12 in the room, the Republicans and the Trump.
If I could,
Just before I forget, if you don't have contacts at Howard, I have some contacts at Howard that are working on this health trust issue in historically black neighborhoods, and I'm happy to pass those on.
that would be great.
nice.
And yeah, if I could just speak to that point really quickly, creating a culture is definitely something that we want to do. I think another great kind of, externality of reaching out to college students is that if this is eventually in place, then we know that college students will be asked every semester or every year. And then, there could be campus groups or activists on campus that are trying to spread information, where then that's a phase 2 of the project where we don't need to create the culture first, but if we get this institution in place, then we can create the culture.
For years.